Welcome to Tips, the Townsend Institute podcast series, a show produced by the Townsend Institute at Concordia University, Irvine. This podcast shares stories of leadership, coaching, and counseling experiences that have shaped the lives and careers of our guests, who then provide tips aimed toward helping listeners grow in both their personal and professional lives. I'm Dr. John Townsend, psychologist, organizational consultant, and author of over 30 books, including the New York Times best-selling Boundaries series. I'm also the founder of the Townsend Institute, and I'm excited to introduce your podcast hosts, Dr. Ashlie Andrew and Dr. Gilbert Fugit.
Hello, everyone. Today we chat with Jim Burns, the founder of HomeWord, best-selling author and well-known youth and family expert. Jim has decades of experience helping families navigate the various stages of youth and family development with a Christ-centered focus.
The HomeWord.com website puts it best. Jim and his team help develop and maintain strong marriages, confident parents, empowered kids, and healthy leaders. We're blessed to have him on the podcast today. Regardless of your current family landscape, there are helpful tips for all to consider. So let's get started. Well, welcome back, everyone, to another episode of the Townsend Institute podcast series. We've got a full house here today. I'm joined by my co-host, Gilbert. Dr. John Townsend is here, as well as Dr. Jim Burns. Welcome, gentlemen.
Great to be with you.
Great to have you here. We are excited to jump right into it. So, Jim, we're just going to open it up, and we would love for you to tell us a little about your journey into ministry and eventually what prompted you to write one of your latest books, A Student's Guide to Sexual Integrity.
Well, actually, I became a Christian when I was 16. I wasn't raised in the church. So my family was quite dysfunctional. Dad was an alcoholic and kind of came from a long line of alcoholics. My mom's dad, my grandpa also, he died of cirrhosis of the liver. So kind of a kid from a dysfunctional family shows up at a church, and it changed my life. I made a commitment to Christ, and that changed my life. It also meant that I didn't have any training from my parents on matters of faith or matters of like morals and values, things like that. They weren't horrible people. They just didn't do that. So I pretty immediately became a youth pastor. Gilbert and I have a background together at my first church. And when I did that, all of a sudden I realized, you know what, this issue of sexuality is a huge thing. You know, the kids weren't asking me, hey, what does Deuteronomy 9 mean? They were saying, so can I kiss on the first date? I mean, they were asking those kind of questions, right? And so over the years, I felt that what kids needed was a blunt, honest, authentic, real approach, and biblical to sexuality. And frankly, I kind of looked around at my brothers and sisters in the church and said, you know, we haven't done a great job. And actually, parents hadn't done a great job either. So over the process of my life, I've done quite a bit of work in that particular area, trying to help kids make right and wise decisions and get them thinking about it from a positive point of view rather than from a negative point of view.
Well, and Jim, of course, I love the shared history at Our Savior Lutheran there in Arcadia. That's really great. But you said in your book here that you've tried to change the narrative of talking about sexual integrity without compromising a biblical worldview. Right. That's got to be. What do you mean by that, and how are you doing that?
Yeah, well, you know, Gilbert, it's a great question because for years, I don't know that we felt awkward even in the church talking about this subject. And for years, I think we've done it from more of a negative standpoint. I think the kids are, don't do it. It's dirty, rotten, horrible. Save that sinful thing until you're married, and then it's not going to be sinful. And it just got them all confused. Then we went through a period of time, especially in the early 2004 to say 2018, 19, maybe around COVID, where the church got connected with what they call the purity culture. And actually, I love the word purity. The word purity is from the Bible. And yet, what I think happened was our narrative was so negative that people said, well, if that's what the church believes, and I don't even think that's what the church believed. God created sex. God sees it as beautiful in the context of marriage. So what I want to do is change the narrative and start saying, wait, no, Jesus led with love. Practice kindness. You can practice kindness and lead with love, whether you agree or disagree. But the Bible says you're created in the image of God, and God loves you unconditionally. And so my hope and prayer, and I wrote it in my journal way before this became a reality, was how do we create a narrative that promotes positive, healthy, biblical values without telling people they're all horrible because they've even thought about sex or sexuality? Or with kids today, you've got two daughters right at the age where at this age is where kids start thinking more about some of their gender issues and some of the peer pressure and all that kind of stuff. And so what I did was I called a friend of mine. Her name is Erin Masha, and she didn't really write the book. She helped me think about the wording because she was an expert. She's the head of parenting at a church called North Point Church in Atlanta, where I'm at quite a bit. And I said, can we do this? And she said, yeah, we can do this. And I think we pulled it off. The narrative can be positive and yet unashamedly biblical. And we haven't really got pushback for that, which is interesting because, again, we're saying you're going to lead with love no matter what you believe. And we're going to treat all people as people who are created in the image of God. And yet at the same time, we're not going to compromise the biblical values because the Bible's really pretty clear on a healthy sexual integrity. We just need to make sure that that's what's presented instead of some of the add-on things that were kind of weird.
Now, not to pivot too much, but I just reviewed Deuteronomy 9, and I can't see anything about sex, romance, dating.
No, I'm just saying kids, they don't want to hear about. That's why. If you'd go to other parts of Deuteronomy.
Oh, I know the other parts.
John, they might go, oh, now that's good. But I was just making up Deuteronomy 9 because, again, it doesn't mean that we don't teach the Bible. Of course we do. That's why for people like me who had a youth ministry background, you've known me since I was in that world. Of course we do. At the same time, we need to also help them understand what does the Bible speak about when it comes to the issues of the day? Does the Bible knowing the Bible help us through the grid of how we treat others, how we treat the opposite sex, how we go about putting things into our mind? The Bible says, renew your mind for good. Well, that's not a sex quote, but it's in the Bible. And I think the greatest sex organ and most powerful sex organ is not the private parts. I think it's the mind. So again, back to that, I'm teasing about the Deuteronomy 9, but you probably know how to spell Deuteronomy, John. I'm not sure I do, but I went to a different seminary than you. But the point that I'm trying to say is, I really think we can change that narrative and still hold the truth of the Bible in a beautiful way. And kids just don't know it. I've said to people that this book, a Student's Guide to Sexual Integrity, is actually my most spiritual book because I use scripture and whatnot, but I'm using it, really in the context of scripture, saying, no, I mean, God created this. God created, the pleasure. God created intimacy. And we've got to figure out how that all relates to what's going on in today's culture. And I think kids have a tough time because they get thrown so many things.
That's why I'm so excited you're here, Jim. We see the need all over the world. And since we're all over the world, so many people they need clarity. And I'm just glad you're providing this with us today. So thank you for this.
It's interesting, John. I remember doing with the Townsend Institute, I remember doing a class on this years ago. And I didn't expect the energy and the input that those students were coming with, because even they needed to be thinking through some things because their parents hadn't talked to them, say. So, I spoke, it was fine, but then it was the interaction. And these are people who are going to be counselors. These are going to be people who are going to be leaders. And they were like, this is the rubber meets the road here, not only for their ministry and their counseling work, but also in their own life with their own children, because nobody has this thing together. I mean, I don't. And so it's important for us to see that this is an important issue. And for kids, it's a more important issue than, unfortunately, Deuteronomy 9. I'm going to go, and by the way, when this podcast is over, first thing I'm going to do is go look up Deuteronomy 9.
Well, Moses reviewing everything with Israel. Here's what's been happening. And, there's the tablets and then he's talking about the golden calf. And I'm thinking, is there a simile? Did Jim come up with a deep, deep metaphor? I missed it.
No. I made it up because last Sunday I preached on Deuteronomy 6 at a church in North Carolina. So I think I just threw something out.
Jim, again, going back, I think it's so excellent that you are talking about it and really trying to normalize the idea of sex in the minds and the lives of these younger people. You started off at the very beginning of your book. We love that the first chapter is titled Awkward.
Yeah. Oh,
What is, I
Ashlie,
mean,
you
it's so
said it.
perfect.
You said it right, because it's not awkward. It's
No.
awkward. Yeah.
Awkward, right? That's how they say it. I mean, what is it that makes that discussion of sex so awkward for kids and even for parents,
Yeah.
right?
Oh, no. Parents just as much.
Yeah.
No, I think part of it is because in our culture, we don't talk probably enough about it in a healthy way. And so, kids didn't hear that from their parents. I just mentioned that I was speaking at church on Sunday, and I said, how many of you, big church in North Carolina, how many of you received good, positive, healthy sex education when you were growing up? I said it to the parents. One person in the church.
Mm.
One hand went up for that service. And then I teased and I said, now your pastor's going to be doing a series on, adults and sexuality. And the pastor goes like this, not me, kind of put his hand over his face. So, it's awkward for parents. So the parents didn't have conversations with the kids. And then the kids, it's something that there's so much baggage that comes into it. And especially in today's world, with some of the things where they're getting their sex education from YouTube or, TikTok or whatever. So it just makes it awkward. And I don't think we do a good job. I didn't do a good job. My daughter, Christy, who lives in Sacramento over by you, Gilbert, in California here, she said, Dad was so good at speaking to kids about this subject, but when he talked to us girls, I have 3 daughters, his bald head sweat, his ears turned red, and he stuttered. Well, that makes sense. I mean, I was talking to my girls about subjects that was uncomfortable to talk about. And that's what I was doing partly for my ministry, was talking to kids about this subject. So makes it awkward. I mean, so Ashlie, when you ask that question, I think what we have to do as adults, whether we're counselors or whether we're parents, is I think we have to just say to the kids, okay, this is going to be awkward. And then I think we have to do a lot of listening. So, I think when we talk, listening is the language of love. So they learn best when they talk, not when we talk. So I think part of it is not us just doing the, lecture preachy bit, but I think it's much more going, hey, what's going on at your school? What are you thinking about these days? What are your friends thinking about? That kind of, you can learn so much better.
Well, that's so helpful because that was going to be my follow-up question. Is you said, you didn't knock it out of the park with your own kids growing up. What would you have done differently? And you kind of just alluded to that a little bit. You would have addressed the awkwardness about it, but then leaned in more to the listening and that piece.
Right. And you know what? I would have done a lot of the same things and just realized it's going to be awkward. I mean, you have conversations that are awkward. And instead of apologizing for that, or instead of just put it in front of them, hey, so this might be awkward, but I think we need to have that conversation. For Kathy and I, we also we live right here by the beach. About once every 6 months, and crazy enough, we still do this. Now we're thinking about our grandkids and other aspects of life, but we would take a little yellow notebook, hers and mine, and we would write down what do we want to talk to our girls about at different stages of their development. And we talk about not just sex education, but sex education, faith development, their own education, extended family issues, all these kind of things. And we'd write it down. And so I remember one time, one of our best conversations happened. Somehow my girls talked me into letting us watch Friends, which wasn't a horrible show, but it's not, 5 of what, Christian leaders are showing their kids. But they talked me into doing it. And in the middle of it, there was a topic about sexuality. Kathy looked at me because we had said we were going to have the conversation with the girls sometimes about that subject. So she handed me, she's in charge. She just handed me the remote and put pause on it and said, looked at me like, okay,
now's your time.
You're up.
I kind of went, what do you guys think? And all of a sudden a spontaneous, we called that planned spontaneity. Anytime we could do planned spontaneity, it was actually better than going through the resources. Now, HomeWord has where I work. We have great books. We have an incredible course on this for kids. You don't see my face on it because you have young people from Atlanta that have done an amazing job with it. But that's not planned spontaneity. But sometimes the best conversations don't take place in a course or a book. They take place, when John talks about with his boys, they would do this walk around the block. And on the second walk around the block, that's when things started to happen. Well, that's spontaneity. That's good stuff. So we don't have to do In fact, I don't think it, I mean, I went through books with my kids that they weren't the kind of books as these. They were kind of the awkward books, but we did that. I don't think that was as good as the planned spontaneity stuff.
Jim, that really hits home, right? Because I'm thinking about, what my parents did, and even my wife's parents, right? I mean, my parents love them, but they did not have the talk. It was more of when a girl came up pregnant, better not be yours. I mean, that was not like,
Which is probably what their parents told them. Who knows,
yeah,
right?
yeah. So yeah, they just were going from that mindset.
Yeah.
And then my wife grew up in a church, our Savior, where they had a whole program on it in middle school and things like that. And their parents said, and it completely embarrassed her, the awkward part. I mean, like they would quiz her afterwards and stuff, and it was way too much probably. But they were intense on it. But now I see some of the biggest concerns today, the culture regarding sexuality, all these things going on. How is this affecting, students and parents and how they're even having these conversations?
Well, I think parents and counselors, anybody else, have to be students of the culture. And so if you're looking at Gen Z kids, we've got another group just coming up now because Gen Z is like 26, 27. But if you're looking at Gen Z kids, we have to be students of their culture. Well, their culture gets their sex education. Number one place is the internet. And when I say the internet, the number one right now social media is YouTube, and then it moves to TikTok. And then it goes Snapchat, all kinds of things. Well, those are all, I mean, those aren't ones that are promoting deep pornography, but in all of those, you're getting a narrative, and whoever rules the narrative wins. And kids are getting a narrative that goes very much against the biblical culture. And so I think we have to be aware of that. Yet all studies show that the more positive, value-centered sex education kids receive from home, from their parents, even if it's awkward, the less confused they'll be and the less promiscuous they'll be. Let me circle confused, because so many of these kids are confused because they're watching 5 hours a day of YouTube, and they're seeing stuff that's going against some of the biblical values. And I'm not saying YouTube is all, I mean, I use YouTube with inspirational stuff sometimes. I mean, but they're getting
it seems to be reels, right? What I notice, my
reels,
kids are it's short bits, right? Reels. Oh, and then it just goes to another thing and it hooks them in there. Yeah,
exactly. No, and it's addictive. I mean, dopamine, that hormone, which is, a pleasure hormone. With reels, you go from one to another, and all of a sudden, next thing you know, I just spent 20 minutes or 2 hours, doing that kind of stuff. So I'm not worried about the little cat videos that kids are watching that, are cute. I'm worried about somebody coming in and saying, 2 weeks ago, I'd never heard of a certain gender, and now I'm identifying as that gender.
Yeah.
I'm concerned about that, because that means that they're getting their information from something that really isn't safe. So yeah, I have concerns about the culture. Now I could whine about the culture. You got an hour, let's do it. But I also think that we have to understand that if we're not students of the culture, we're not going to understand what's happening with our kids. Take pornography, for example. It just moved to age 9 for boys, and 9 point something. And for girls, it moved to 11 years, 8 months. I mean, not that long ago, it was 14 years old for girls, and it was higher for boys. So what's happening is we as parents have to understand that first look, their first sex education may be something that goes totally against our values. We're deeply involved in their school. We're deeply involved in their sports activities. We're deeply involved in dance recitals and things like that, but we're not willing to talk to them about something that's actually more important to their character, to their core, to their relationship with God. And yet, if we do it, then we do it probably on a negative view. We don't have to. We have the master designer is the master designer of our sexuality is God. So we got him on our side. So let's make him look good instead of make him look like the great killjoy.
Jim, now that you've done the research, and I just love the way the book resonates. What about what are the kids reporting, the ones that you hear about, when mom and dad do it right?
Right.
Or the kids, what are they saying about that? I think our listeners need to know that.
Yeah, I mean, mom and dad are now the safe ones. You go to where, whoever pays attention to you influences you. So if your parents talk to you, and if they talk to you at a younger age even, but if they have those conversations, then I feel comfortable. Since my parents never talked to me about it, John, I'm not burning on them because I'm sure their parents didn't talk to them, like you said, but they weren't safe for me. So I had questions as a young teenager, but I wasn't going to go to my dad about it. I wasn't going to go to my mom because that was a conversation that had never been brought up.
Yeah.
So when parents do it, I sometimes think I get the eye roll from a kid. Right before Christmas, I was speaking at something in November. I was doing a marriage conference and then I preached at a church, and this mom comes up and her daughter is about 11, puts her arm around the daughter and goes, "This is the guy that wrote the book on sex that we went through." And the mom was all excited. The girl's look was like, "This is creepy." And I go, "How did that work for you?" And she goes, "I didn't always like it." Like she was going to hurt my feelings. And my mom just kind of kept, she was kind of burned on her mom a little bit. And I said, "But do you feel more comfortable talking to your mom about this?" And she goes, "I do." So
mission accomplished.
yeah. And so I loved it because for me, what she didn't realize, the mom was like, "I'm so sorry my daughter, said this." And I go, "No, I get it. What kid wants to meet the guy who wrote the sex book that they, had their parents go through, in a goofy way." But if you do that, there's a much greater chance that those kids are then going to feel like you as a parent are safe. I mean, in counseling, one of the reasons a counselor is safe is because they're willing to bring up subjects that haven't been brought up in the home.
Right.
And so and they're willing to listen, and they're willing to engage, and they're willing to, ask the right questions. Well, that's because you became safe and the parents say weren't. So that's what I hope happens, and that's what I'm hearing happens. We're getting a lot because of the youth ministry side. We're getting a lot of youth groups, going through it. We have a course that they can go through, and it's all these cool and groovy. That's my old word that I'm trying to bring back. But you could do that with your band, John. But I'm trying to. They're cool people who are talking with these kids, not in just a talk. They're doing all kinds of fun stuff. They're doing it, on their cell phone, and they're doing all these fun things. Well, that makes it better for these kids to have those kinds of conversations. But we also encourage all churches, if you're going to do that, then also have something for the parents. Because, now the kids are comfortable and the parents are like, "Seriously, I don't want you to talk to me about this." And you know what the number one thing that people ask, HomeWord is the number one or the largest parenting seminar group, in the nation. And when we do teaching your children healthy sexuality, the first question is always, well, do we tell our kids that we screwed up? What do we say about, if we ask our teenagers, Gilbert's daughter's age, if we ask that question, what do we say? Do we lie to them? And I always just say, no, you say, "I have so much passion for this because I didn't always do it right." You don't have to tell them all your stories. I didn't always do it right. So I want you to have a better, chance at this. But yeah, and we don't have to go through all the details, and the kid wants more details and you don't give it to him.
Wow. Well, you bring in those statistics, which are just startling and as a parent, downright scary, really. Just younger and younger and the access to stuff. So you talked a little bit about how to broach, the awkwardness of it, that planned spontaneity I thought was great, whether it's a, episode of their favorite show or a walk around the block. How soon is soon enough to start these conversations? Because that's going to be the next question. Now, I don't have the teenagers yet, but in a few years I will.
Okay, Ashlie, you're not going to like this answer then.
Uh-oh. Okay.
3 to 5. And you don't talk necessarily about all aspects of sex and sexuality, of course, but we have at HomeWord, we have a beautiful book called God Made Your Body. So what you start by doing at 3 to 5, and it's not even awkward for them. It's awkward for the parent because you say, God made boys and God made girls, and what color eyes do you have? God made your eyes. So it's a lot of God talk, frankly.
Yeah.
You get to a part where you say between 3 and 5, every little boy, I'm sure this is okay on your podcast, John can give me permission or you can bleep it out. Every little boy was created with a penis. Every little girl has a vagina.
Mm-hmm.
So now the kids at 3 to 5 they're not even, laughing about it because they're so young. They're like, cool,
Yeah.
By the time they get 6 to 8, which is another book for us called How God Makes Babies, where we don't go into all the, details. But what we do when we go back to, and every little boy has a penis, every little girl has a vagina, they probably giggle. Well, but see now, what that happens is you're sitting on the sofa, you're reading a book to them. It's a picture book, but it's cool. It's not weird or gross or anything. And then now you're the safe one. So we had a funny experience not last weekend, but the weekend before, we had our 4-year-old Huxley, who's our grandson. And he picks up my book called God Made Your Body. And it's a cool book. It has, this is a podcast, so you can't see this, but, it has cool kids and, all this thing. So he picks this up and he says, Papa Jay, read this. And I'm like, oh, geez, I haven't got permission from Heidi yet. So Heidi's in Japan, my daughter. So I text her, take a picture of the book and go, hey, is it okay? And she goes, oh, absolutely. I've been wanting to do that. So yeah, great. Make grandpa, read that book. So I read through the book with him and he loved it. And then he asked 2 questions. He said, Papa Jay, did you know me when I was in my mommy's tummy? And I said, well, I sure loved you. And I got teary-eyed right then. But you were so special. But no, I met you after you were born. And then our dog, we have a golden retriever, was right by us. And he loves this golden retriever. And then he says, did grandma have Miko, which is the golden retriever, in her tummy? and we died laughing. So when they're that young, the questions that they ask are just fabulous. But guess what? The next day, he had another question, and it wasn't heavy. I mean, we're not talking heavy duty. He's 4 years old, but he had another question about he had a question more about his brother. He has a baby brother, and wanted to know more about when the baby brother is going to get to stand and go into the potty like he can now, right? So what that meant was he felt comfortable asking me that question.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying? So you bring 3 to 5 is one stage, another phase of development. So all of the counselors that go through the Townsend Institute learn about development stage.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
6 to 9 is another development stage, and 6 to 9 they ask a lot of questions. 6 to 9, by 6 to 9 you want to be able to say, no one has the right to touch your private parts, and no one has the right to show you, things like that. And if they do, even if you love and trust them, then you tell mommy and daddy, and we will not get mad at you. We'll tell you, because why? Well, sexual abuse happens with children. 80% of sexual assaults among children are with somebody that they know.
Somebody they know.
So now with kids, so that's sex education. See, we think it's just about don't do it. Oh, it's so much more. So we've got to broaden the conversation. And when I have those kind of conversations with my grandkids, but even with my kids, then guess who they come to? I mean, our girls, when they got to be later in teen years, I'm like, could you not ask me that question? But they felt comfortable.
Yeah.
They would feel comfortable talking with Kathy. And I realized it's really tough for single parents because, you got, different sex kind of going on, meaning, the son is going to talk to the mom about stuff that a son could talk to dad about. But, with us, they wouldn't ask me about their, going through their period, but they would ask me questions that were really relational about boys. And honestly, Kathy and I both blushed at times with some of the stuff they said to us in college. And we're like, oh, you guys, okay, here it goes. But I think that was because we were fortunate enough to do a better job in those younger years.
Yeah, it's sort of like you broke the shame barrier and you took initiative so that it was now normal conversation. And also what I really like is that your approach, because some parents get really anxious, like I don't have all the answers. You don't have to have the answers. If you've gotten so now it's in our conversation and our normal family talk, and somebody has a question, then the child says, "What about this?" You go, "Oh, I'll look into it." And
I have no idea.
it's not about having the encyclopedia ready. It's about moving in.
No, exactly. And I think actually, John, that's a better parenting move than most anything, is when you go, I don't really know, but let's look at this together. I'll look at it, you look at it, especially when they get to be a little bit more of an age, especially with culture type things or the Bible. They ask a question about the Bible, or why would a loving God allow somebody to die, or these different kind of things. You know what? Let's look at that. And even if we kind of know, we think we have the answer, just zip the mouth and investigate it together, because I think people support people help. When you allow your kids to work together with you to find out, then they support that answer even better than if you just go, well, it's because this happens or because that. Now you're the authority, as opposed to together, searching for it. That's a really good parenting move.
So you talked about the spontaneous, when something, and then you're able to talk to them about it. Maybe what are 2 or 3 other strategies you have for
Yeah.
talking with teenagers, for
Yeah.
parents?
Yeah. Well, I really like that part, but and parents have to get past the eye roll, because when you're talking about sexuality, there is going to be an eye roll. And so don't worry about it. Just
Mm.
go, okay, that's a part of the normal thing. That's about that part of that awkward thing. But I also think I call it KISS. Keep it short and simple. I
Mm.
think where you do best when you're talking about subjects like this is the really short, kind of have a short conversation and move on. But I found with my girls, sometimes they didn't want me to ask them about them, but I'd say, "Hey, what do you think the kids at school think
Mm.
about
Yeah.
this? What do you
Mhm.
think the kids at church think about this?" And man, they had all kinds of deals. Well, guess what? They were also sort of telling me what
Yeah.
they were thinking. And then
Mm.
I would always say, "Hey, look and they knew I wanted to be a student of their culture. And so I would say, what's influencing you? What's influence not just my daughters, but you as a whole, group of people. My girls are millennials. What music is influencing you?
Mhm.
What movies are influencing you? What television shows are they watching? What's now in terms of, the new world? What are you streaming?
Mm.
Mhm.
Those kinds of things. And that became really helpful to me. And I did that a lot. Um, and actually, I still do that
Mhm.
with
Mhm.
people all the time. And I think we can learn a lot by. So those are a couple of other
Yeah.
little tips, if you would, that can kind of help think through those.
Well, and it's really just a testament to the leaning into the listening, right?
Yeah.
Asking more questions to get more answers. And so I'm interested now, and John, I think you can speak to this too, as we talk about, the Townsend model and character capacities. Oftentimes we see students really just adults coming into our programs with these eye-opening experiences.
Mhm.
Talk about what a healthy conversation and relationship with sexuality that you get maybe through some of Jim's work and his team, what that means for people then into adulthood when we talk about attachment
Mm.
and separation, right? If they get that early on, I can only imagine just how much healthier and better off they'll be much later on in life.
Right. With our model, Jim, we've got it rendered down to the 4 stages. We call it Asia. It's an acronym, the continent. ASIA to make it easy to remember. And so, kind of everything we do to teach people how to, whatever it's sexuality or marriage or whatever, how understanding those 4 stages that you're aware of affect those areas. And so, with something like that, when you're having a good talk about, or you want to have the good talk, A means the first one is attachment. That means if you're anxious, go work out the anxiety outside with your
Mm.
spouse or your friend or something. Because if you're anxious, the kid's going to read it from them. And then all of a sudden, why is the big person scared? So make sure you're attached.
Yeah.
Not that you know everything, but
Yeah.
be present with them. Emotional presence is huge in having the talk. S stands for separation, and that's all the boundary stuff and defining yourself and all that. And that's when you come in and you say, I'm going to say some things that maybe your friends aren't saying or the culture's not saying, and we can talk about them. But my goal, because I love you, is to tell you the truth that'll help you. That's the separation part, and that's not judgment. That's not anything like guiltifying. It's like this is true. And kids are waiting for truth these days because the whole thing about, well, that's your truth, that's my truth. Well, that's not. There's only God's truth.
Right.
So this is what I think the truth is. They feel more calm when they hear truth. Then I is integration, where you have to say, well, here's the good parts of life, here's the bad parts of life, and you've got to live with both of them. Well, gosh, sexuality is replete with that, and just being able to say, like Jim started our podcast off with, we believe so much in it. We want you to have a rich sex life, and God designed it that way, all the way from Adam and Eve. But there are ways that it can go bad, and we don't want you to experience those too. But be aware of them. We're not going to hide them. So we're not moving into do what you want. We're not also going into it's bad at all. That's the integration part. And then adulthood, like you mentioned, Ashley, when you go in there, think about future kid. Your kid's at 11 or 12 is going to be 19 and either going to look back and regret and say I didn't get anything because mom and dad were scared of it and I just listened to the wrong people, or they're going to go, I got another tool to handle dating, to handle sexuality, to handle virginity, to handle that. I got a tool, and I'm so glad that as a 19-year-old, I got that from my parents. And if you keep that lens, it sort of makes it all make sense, I think.
By the way, that was brilliant. I want to take a copy of that and just send it out to the HomeWord people, because that is right. You just said it.
You're
And it's
keeping the kid's character in mind while you're trying to teach them about a particular topic.
it is so good. Plus, you said it with that cool Southern accent. I know you don't think you have that Southern accent, but
Well,
you know,
hey, North Carolina over here, right? I
oh,
saw the
yeah.
jealousy in his eyes when you mentioned that you were back there last
Well,
week.
Ashley, you know how I am. Now that Jim mentioned it, I tried to keep my mind on the topic, but I kept thinking barbecue,
Barbecue.
barbecue. And I had to do an intervention on myself.
That's it. That's it. No, it's just, when John speaks, I melt, because I want that kind of a accent, because I just think it sounds cooler than somebody from Orange County, California.
Well, we could maybe John could teach us that, right? We could have a whole session on how to talk
How
like
to
you're from
talk
North
Southern.
Carolina.
As
There's a
long as
book.
you call it proper English, I'm happy to do it.
Yeah. No, no. I
Well,
had somebody this week, because I was in North Carolina this week, and I was in a rent-a-car, and I have not been to a gas station where somebody comes out and says, can we do this? And what happened was I pulled into the wrong side of the pump, because they had this at this place. And he said, do you need something? He said, do you need me to check your oil? And I didn't know what he was saying. I said, I'm sorry, I don't know. And then he realized I didn't know how to speak Southern. So he said, oil, but it counted, but oil. I didn't even know what he was talking about. So,
It's so funny. We Ashley and Gilbert and I had Gary Chapman, the five love languages guy, on the podcast, and he lives in Winston-Salem, North Carolina.
absolutely.
And we talked about the nuances. Like, I'm a vinegar barbecue guy, and what was he?
His mustard.
He's a mustard guy, and we went on all that
Mhm.
stuff, and it just brought me back.
No, isn't
Anyway.
that funny? Yeah, I'm amazed. And the vinegar stuff, John, I think I know you pretty well. I didn't know that. It's a new thing. And I tried vinegar barbecue Saturday, just last week, and I went, yuck. So I just
Oh.
moved it on. So I'm
No.
with Gary.
No.
No, you're right about that, Jim, because sometimes very, very important things in our life we don't like at first, and I get that. It's part of your discipleship, and I'm glad you're on the journey.
That's good. Well,
Anyway, Gilbert, I'm diverting
Plus
off of this
we-
podcast.
Hey,
and my
you never know where it's
adult
going to go.
ADD comes in, and I'm like, you guys did
Yeah.
great.
Jim, as we're thinking about this, one thing we always do as we kind of wrap up everything, of course, we talk about barbecue. That's always very important. But we talk about what is a tip that you'd like for everyone to walk away with today from our time together.
Yeah, great question. And I think my tip was, don't try vinegar barbecue if you've never had it before. No, that's not. Actually, for me, and I'm gonna bounce on because I thought what John said so well. I think we need to learn as adults to get comfortable with our own sexuality. Like
That's great.
because our parents didn't talk to us. So I think we sometimes approach our kids out of our own needs, and we haven't done the work that we need to do. As you know, and people who are, therapists, people who are in ministry, pastoral ministry, whatnot, they need to make sure they work on their own soul. They need to make sure that they work on their own stuff. And if we
That's
want to change
really
the
good.
trajectory of looking at healthy sexuality, then we've got to get our own stuff together. And again, that doesn't mean that we have to be harsh on ourselves if we are carrying baggage into it. Just get the help that you need. But when we deal with our own sexuality and become more comfortable in that realm, and never totally comfortable, but when we become more comfortable in that world, I think we're going to do a lot better. And I call it the transitional generation. The Bible says that you inherit the sin of the previous generation to the third and fourth generation. Well, for Kathy and I, and even in our marriage, we had to become transitional generation folks. We either had to recover or repeat. So I think what we do with sexuality is we recover, but we can't expect our kids to recover if we haven't also recovered. So I'm begging parents and also people who are counseling with kids or working with kids, I'm begging them to do the work that it takes for you to get at least semi-comfortable with this. And today there are great books out there. There are great resources out there for kids, also for adults. And, I think it's one of the issues. There's certain issues we got to work on in our life, all of the rest of our life. this is one of them. So I encourage. So my tip is, it's funny, we've been talking about kids, but my tip is, no, make sure you get as comfortable as you can with your own sexuality, because a lot of us, that's the number one hang up potentially for not going farther with our kids.
Oh, that's so helpful, Jim. We just can't thank you enough. And for our listeners out there, I mean, look it up. You and your team have so many amazing resources. Obviously, we've talked a lot today about your latest book that came out last year, right? A Student's Guide to Sexual Integrity. But there are a whole host of more that come from that. Just to direct people to your website, it's homeword.com. We'll make sure we put it in our episode notes as well. HOMEWORD. I know as a parent myself, I found it incredibly helpful. No matter what stage you're at, right? Whether you've started to have the conversations or you're just preparing for them in the future. Such great information, and we just can't thank you enough for your time today.
I really agree with Ashlie on that, Jim, and to all our listeners and viewers. We're all looking for sources, and having known Jim as a good friend for so many years, I'll tell you that you go on the website. Number one, you'll know that he is biblical. Number two, you'll know he's trustworthy. And number three, he's done his homework. The things he says work. So go to it. I can't tell you how valuable Jim's material has been over the decades.
Well, thank you. Thank you. Great to be with you. And John, one of the reasons why you do such great jobs is because you have great people like Gilbert and Ashlie hanging around. So, now I see you're hanging around with some pretty awesome people. And the Institute is awesome. I tell people all the time when they're looking for something, I tell them to check it out, because I really believe in it.
We appreciate
Thanks so much. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Jim.
If you enjoy the Townsend Institute podcast series, head to our website at cui.edu/Townsend to find out more about the certificates, bachelor's, master's, and doctoral degrees offered through Concordia University, Irvine. With programs in mental health counseling, executive coaching and consulting, and organizational leadership, we have a variety of faith-based programs dedicated to helping you fulfill your academic and professional goals, all the while furthering your competence, character, and connection. Again, that's cui.edu/Townsend.